You're listening to Season 10 of Mobile Suit Breakdown, a weekly podcast covering the entirety of sci-fi mega franchise Mobile Suit Gundam from 1979 to today.
This is episode 10.35. The title gives it away, and we're your hosts. I'm Tom, and for our American listeners, I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving. For our international listeners, may you joyously consume the largest and most delicious local bird or vegan equivalent at your earliest convenience.
And I'm Nina, new to Victory Gundam and feeling like I need a disclaimer in the front end of this episode. Yes, the talkback is almost entirely complaints, but also yes, I really did enjoy the episode. Mobile Suit Breakdown is made possible by our paying subscribers, learned patrons of the finest in Gundam scholarship. Thank you all, and special thanks to our newest patrons, Justin M., The Important Cinema Club, Jimco, Kevin W., and Aged Pasta. You keep us Genki. And special thanks to Fancy Wookie for supporting us on Ko-fi, Boaz for the lovely little care package you sent, and to several returning patrons. We're glad to see you back. Announcement time. Due to some imminent changes to EU import regulations, there will be no new episode next week while we rush to deal with this season's patron merch. For a more fulsome explanation, check out the post on our Patreon page. We plan to return to our regular schedule the following week.
This week, Victory episode 35, Haha Ka Shakti Ka, aka Mother or Shakti. The episode was written by Okeya Akira and storyboarded by Kase Mitsuko. Sato Ikuro directed, and Seo Yasuhiro was in charge of the animation. Now, the recap.
As the Zanskar Motorrad fleet continues its overland route northward, League militaire forces do everything they can to pick off Bespa mobile suits and harry the fleet, without causing any more reactor explosions. They've yet to see any sign of the promised Federation backup. Gosbarl, captured just before the fleet made land, manages to pick his handcuffs, break out of his cell, and sneak into his mobile suit, threatening to destroy the hangar and everyone in it if they try to prevent his escape. When he flies off to rejoin his own squad, he even takes the V2 with him. But that was all part of the plan. What better way to infiltrate the Zanskar flagship than to be brought there by a Bespa pilot? Uso and Odello hide aboard the V2 and Gosbarl's mobile suit respectively, as Tomasz makes a convincing show of pursuit. Once inside the Adrastia, they disguise themselves as new cadets, pushing a laundry cart. If anyone questions what they're doing, they can claim to be lost. As they search for Uso's mother, they overhear that the Federation forces are concentrated on the Zanskar Vanguard, Pipiniden's Rasteo fleet. When they find Mira's cell, she almost knocks them out. She had already subdued the guard stationed outside and was working on an escape plan of her own. But now both plans will need to change. Shakti is also aboard the Adrastia, and they can't leave her in Chronicle's clutches. While Uso and Odello search, Mira will take the explosives they brought and create a diversion to cover their escape. Not long after, explosions ring out aboard the ship. As the crew scramble through smoke-filled corridors to fight fires and assess the damage, Uso and Odello find Shakti's room, and use a fire hose and extinguisher to knock out and tie up the guards outside. Unfortunately, that same chaos brings not only additional guards, but Chronicle himself, checking on his niece, the princess. Brandishing a handgun, Uso pretends to be taking Shakti hostage, threatening to shoot her if the soldiers call for help. The ruse fails when Chronicle recognizes Uso. He knows the boy won't hurt Shakti. It's a standoff until Odello opens fire. When the enemy soldiers take cover, the kids run for it, making a mad dash for the mobile suit hangar. Still, they don't know the ship, and turning a corner, they are once again confronted by Chronicle, flanked by soldiers. Frozen, unsure what to do, they all gape, wide-eyed, as a small bomb is lobbed at Chronicle's feet. Mira has arrived. She tells the kids to run, escape, while she keeps Chronicle at bay. Her plan is successful. The kids make it to their mobile suits, and despite some resistance from the pilots there, including Katajina, they make it out of the Adrastea. Uso's V2 clambers up the outside of the ship, peering into the bridge. There, he sees his mother captured again. And the smile she gives him carries a message, that he should go and take Shakti to safety. Shakti believes she could convince her uncle to let Mira go, but Uso is certain. Despite the pain of it, and the tears streaming down his face, he has to leave his mother behind.
There was something I forgot to mention when we were talking about nuclear bombs, nuclear reactors going critical and exploding in our previous episode, which is not only do nuclear fusion engines not create a big explosion, mushroom cloud, etc., they also don't spread radioactive fallout. They don't contaminate the Earth the way everybody keeps talking about. So either everybody in the show is wrong, or, like we speculated, there's something different about these reactors. Since we posted that episode, a few people in the comments have pointed out that maybe it's the miniaturization of the reactors. They were already really small to be able to get them into those big first Gundam era 19-meter tall mobile suits, but now with the mobile suits even smaller and the explosions somehow even bigger, maybe it's the additional compression of the reactor that results in those big booms. And also, I guess, a bunch of contaminants. But certainly Chronicle's side seems a lot less worried about those explosions now. They take it very much with blasé sang-froid when one of these Federation battleships goes critical in front of them. Yet the Ligue Militaire still does not want to destroy these battleships.
In the previous episode, there was at least some passing acknowledgement of, oh no, the Ligue Militaire is causing these explosions to happen by resisting us. You know, they expressed some regret over those explosions happening.
And they were like, oh yeah, we invented the motor-rad battleships so that we could exterminate the population of Earth without using any icky nuclear weapons.
However, I've got to tell you, in this episode, that is the least of the things that didn't make sense to me.
I was wondering how long it would take us to get to that. Okay. Yeah, let's talk about the things that don't make sense.
To start with, we have the Ligue Militaire, in particular Marbet and the other Shrike pilots, lamenting that the Federation has not come to their aid yet, saying, well, our mistake was expecting them to show up for us. We are going to have to do this ourselves. We cannot depend on the Federation.
And those are like the first lines of dialogue in the episode. Really sets you up to expect the story to go in that direction.
And has sort of felt like a running part of the story of the Ligue Militaire, that here they are, in some ways, fighting the Federation's battles for them with little to no Federation support.
And Gazbarl flags this too when he's in the interrogation chamber eating his dinner. He's like, oh, you Ligue Militaire folks, you're really trying to drag the Federation in. They're really setting up a storyline where the Federation backs out and leaves the Ligue Militaire holding the bag, or where the Ligue Militaire has to pull off some kind of really impressive maneuver in order to convince the Federation that they've got the juice and that they're worth helping. But no, none of that stuff happens.
Yet, not too long after this, we've got Katajina talking about how the Federation forces are concentrating on the Vanguard, on Pipiniden's part of the fleet, the Rasteo fleet, and that Pipiniden's Vanguard destroys a Federation ship. So the Federation is here.
Mm-hmm.
Is it that there is a comms issue? Ligue Militaire doesn't know that the Federation forces have arrived but are in a different part of the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
There have been a lot of communication issues, even among ships in the same fleets. However, how spread out are these forces? It does seem odd that this Ligue Militaire force, for all that they're kind of small, would have no idea that the Federation is there fighting.
Especially when, in just the prior episode, they did have intelligence. They did know that the Federation was concentrating in front of them.
So there's one.
I love that the battle with the Federation is just off screen, just over there, just beyond those mountains. Don't worry about it, but there is a very, very exciting battle happening. No, you can't see it. It's just over there. I promise it's so thrilling.
Number 2. What is the intended purpose of Uso and Odello's infiltration of the Adrastea?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because they don't know that Shakti is there. They don't know that Mira is there.
They do know that Mira is there.
But they're not there to bust her out. That's not why.
I think they are. No, they are. They totally are. I think that's the reason. Okay, this is hard to talk about because the show either doesn't communicate this very clearly or like changes its mind at a couple places. I'm pretty confident they're there to get Mira off. I should rephrase that.
Phrasing. Although Odello might be into it.
Odello has Camille syndrome in this episode. Odello sees a cute girl on the enemy side and he's like, I'm going to save her.
No.
It doesn't work out for him, but he tries.
Odello's the ugly one. I have a crush on every girl.
Good for him.
Anyway, backtracking.
Where was I?
You were there to... They're here to get Mira Miguel out of the ship, not off of the ship.
Yes.
Well, or off the ship.
When they get to Mira, she tells them that Shakti is aboard the ship with her. They didn't know that, so it can't possibly be to get Shakti. Uso then says, I think it's Uso, he says, yeah. Uso then says, in response to this, we have a mission. And Odello then pulls all of these plastic explosives out of his jacket. He's like, no, if it's her, if it's Mira, I'm sure she can handle it. She can do the mission while we get Shakti out of the battleship. You assume, in that brief line of dialogue, that their mission was to plant plastic explosives all over the ship and set them off in order to do from the inside what they can't do from the outside, disable the Adrastea.
But then they immediately say that the explosives are merely diversionary.
Exactly.
To help them get
escape.
Off the ship. Yeah.
Yes. To help them get off.
You did that on purpose.
That time, yes. Which means the explosives are there to help distract the guards so that they can get out with Mira. The reason they're there. Because there are 3 possibilities for why they might be there. Get Shakti, get Mira, destroy the Adrastea. And it's not get Shakti, and it's not destroy the Adrastea because they say the explosives are just for a diversion.
You're giving them a lot of credit in that you're assuming that this all makes sense somehow. They just didn't explain it to us properly.
Yes, I am. That's my job right now. So from this, we can then make another conclusion based on the evidence in front of us, which is that the reason they can't destroy the Adrastea, or the reason they don't want to destroy it, is because they know that Uso's mother is on it, and they don't want to kill her. Now, this is very stupid, but that is the logical conclusion of all of the evidence that the episode is presenting us. 'Cause otherwise, what's the point of this operation? I mean, I said earlier that it was stupid, and it's stupid for 2 reasons. One, these battleships are destroying whole cities. They're killing thousands, tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of people. There is no way the League Militaire would be like, oh, we could stop them, but it would make Uso sad if his mother died. Like, no, they would stop them if they could. They can't stop them because they're too strong. That's been abundantly established in the show thus far.
The other thing is Mira wouldn't want them
to
use her life as a reason not to destroy this ship.
No.
This is one of the things about the title of the episode, and the title kind of giving away the game, right? It says, Mother or Shakti. Mira would want Uso to make the same choice she made when she shoved Shakti out of the way and got captured in Shakti's place.
Yes. And the choice that she makes again this episode, and that Uso makes, and that she, like, by smiling at him, tells him he made the right choice.
Right. She obviously wants to survive if she can. She takes great efforts to escape and is a total badass and really cool.
Yeah.
Clearly, Uso learned some of his actual human martial arts skills from his mother.
I was thinking about this. Mira is Like, we've talked a couple of times about how unrealistic Uso is as a character. Like, Uso is just too good at stuff. Uso is too pure, too good at everything he does. He is an impossible child. Mira is like an impossible mother, especially by Gundam standards. She's just too good. If Sayla was too strong, Mira is too good.
Except that if you think about people like them in the real world, you kind of picture almost like weird survivalist preppers, you know, or like in superhero stories or fantasy stories where someone is raised from a very young age to be a hero and so spends their whole life being trained in languages and martial arts and all these bizarre skills. Like, if that were a real person, we'd be like, wow, what freaks.
Right? But it's also that Mira, in addition to all of her, like, cool commando skills, she always does the right thing emotionally for Uso.
She's so proud of him.
Yes.
It's so sweet. And he's clearly embarrassed. He blushes and is like, Mom.
She loves her little battle boy.
But he doesn't shove out of her embrace. He is very touched and moved by her pride in him.
And he respects her. When she smiles at him on the bridge, he's like, oh, she's telling me to go. And he hates it. He wants to say, he wants to fight, he wants to keep trying to get her. But he says, Mom smiled, I gotta go. Tears streaming down his face in the process. But this whole infiltration mission, come on. You go to all this trouble. The actual, like, process of doing it, very cool. Love to see the League Militaire, like, get one over on those arrogant Bespies.
Letting the prisoner escape so they lead you to something important or give you access to something important. Classic. So good.
And it works so well for them. They manage to get 2 mobile suits and a bunch of plastic explosives inside the Adrastea.
Oh, one thing about Gosbarl's escape, though.
Yeah.
This is another moment where I'm like, hang on a second. He's adjusting his normal suit and trying to get the helmet properly fitted to the body. And he describes the neck ring of either the normal suit or helmet or both as being international standard. What does that even mean in the Universal Century? Inter what nations?
The sides. Okay, hang on. We don't really know entirely how the Earth Federation works, but it seems to be an overgrown, bloated version of the UN. So there are still nations within it.
But so meaningless as to have never been relevant to any of these shows ever.
Au contraire, you might remember that New Hong Kong was a special leased territory. Who were they leasing it from, Nina, if not another nation?
Okay, you've convinced me that nations exist. You have not convinced me of their relevance.
Well, if we didn't have nations, then they couldn't agree on an international standard. The international standard for equipment has actually been referenced at least once before. I don't remember particularly when, but it's one of these situations where somebody is like picking up the wrong gun for their mobile suit or something. But yeah, the idea is that at some point after the 1-year war, a lot of this stuff got standardized, so you can just swap a Zaku head onto the Zeta, or put a League Militaire piloting helmet on your Vespa pilot suit.
I would just like to hearken back to the XKCD comic about creating universal standards for basically anything, and that this gets attempted quite frequently, actually, and then you just have one more standard.
But you can do it if you have enough political and military power behind it, which the Federation apparently does, or did at some point. It's the main advantage of the Federation. They can finally standardize all these things. There's only one type of electrical outlet in the whole Universal Century, and everybody speaks Esperanto.
Ah, but do they use 110 or 220?
Are those like model scales? It's usually like 160, 100.
Never mind.
All I know is the prongs are the same. Who cares about the ampules or whatever?
All right. I have another thing that doesn't make sense to bring up, but do you want to keep talking about international standards or some...
No, I was kind of hoping you'd ask me about Bespies.
Oh, I mean, I think it speaks for itself. I like it.
It's a fun little epithet you can use. Like if somebody comes up to you and is like, the patriarchy hurts everybody, you can say, that's so true, Bespie. But then if they go on to say, but under the matriarchy, only the guilty and the corrupt will be exterminated, you can say, get out of my house, Squadron Leader Katajina Luz. But once they have pulled one over on these arrogant Bespies and gotten a couple of mobile suits into the Adrastea that is, again, killing tens of thousands of people, we have watched it happen. The horrors of the previous episode are still in my mind. They have mobile suits inside the battleship. Why don't they do anything about it? Why don't they destroy it from the inside?
For the same reason they didn't destroy it before. They've still got Mira. And quite possibly for the same reason that apparently none of these people shooting guns can hit anything. Even though they're firing like automatic and semi-automatic fire in narrow hallways where it would ricochet around, and like it feels literally impossible to me that not a single person in any of those scenes got shot. Not even a little bit.
Yeah. Again, the tone is all over the place, right? Like those scenes where they're sliding down banisters or down like firemen's poles during their escape.
It's almost slapstick.
Yes.
It has this sort of madcap, fun, exciting tone rather than being frightening or anxiety-inducing.
And then you get Chronicle dropping lines like, sometimes the ego of a mother can get her child killed. I hope to demonstrate this to you. Like, dang, Garma. Did Char teach you that line? That's cold.
Why did neither Odello nor Uso shoot Chronicle?
Why did Mira not set off the bomb when she got tackled? The remote was still in her hand.
She would have died too.
Yeah.
She's probably hoping that she can still escape.
That feels very contrary to the way her character has been built up thus far.
I mean, I agree with you.
She has an opportunity to kill Chronicle Asher, potentially disable the Adrastea.
Actually, I was going to argue with you some more.
But you've been convinced by the force of my persuasive logic?
And by the show itself, because showing one of your good guys commit a suicide bombing is pretty loaded.
Oh, yeah.
Story-wise.
Mm-hmm.
However, we've seen multiple good guy characters commit suicide missions and suicide attacks. So why would this be all that different?
Yeah, like 4 episodes ago, Oliver did it.
Right. So I do think people who aren't in mobile suits or any sort of vehicle, the human element and the fact that it is an explosive has some very different historical and social connotations.
Mm-hmm.
But functionally, it's not that different. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Speaking of the escape and the tone of the escape.
Flanders' miraculous appearance.
Right. Where the heck did Flanders come from?
And where did he go after the couple of shots that he was in?
I have one theory, which is that
Flanders space?
I was going to suggest animal sidekick space, which is to say like hammer space, but closer to... I can't think of a specific example, unfortunately, but I know there are a bunch of fighting games where there's a special move you can use that basically like summons an animal companion. In Darkstalkers, if you're Little Red Riding Hood, can't you summon a wolf to like attack people or something? Anyway, it's like that. Flanders gets summoned up when they need him and then disappears into animal sidekick space.
I've been playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I've got a wolf that can attack people for me. I think his name is Mouse. But you're going to have to explain hammer space, because I know you and I are extremely in our mid-30s, but most of our audience is not.
That's fair. So hammer space is in video games and in anime when a character, usually a girl...
Cute little girl. The small size of the girl is important.
Yeah. Just sort of usually pulls from behind her back, but effectively manifests from the ether a huge hammer weapon that she uses to bonk somebody. And then the hammer disappears into the ether just as quickly. There is no indication that she is carrying this massive hammer, a hammer bigger than she is. But it's there, and it lives in hammer space.
This is what passed for an anime meme on the primordial internet. This predates even the yaoi paddle and things like that.
Although one could argue that perhaps this comes from Mary Poppins and her magical carpet bag that somehow contains huge pieces of furniture that she just draws up out of the bag, among other things.
Mary Poppins, anime girl.
You heard it here first, folks. Unless somebody else beat us to that observation.
Weren't we talking about Gundam?
There is what I assume has to be some kind of little Easter egg in the escape scene also. You know, aside from Flanders' ears and tongue flapping in the breeze as they go down the pole, and then all of them sliding down that metal banister. While they are sliding down the metal banister, either Karlman is holding, or it's drawn as though it's attached to Odello's gun, a tiny Japanese flag.
Huh.
Just because.
I did not notice that at all.
I took a screenshot so I could show you, but...
So you saw that. You noticed that. And then you came on this program and denied the existence of nations in the Universal Century.
Just because they have a Japanese flag doesn't mean Japan still exists. Maybe it's an antique. Maybe there are some weirdos who want to revive the nation of Japan that no longer exists. Just like how there are people in France who want to bring back the monarchy.
I want to point out that in Zeta, Frabo and kids fly to Japan as like a safe place to get away to and avoid the chaos of the events of Zeta Gundam. But they could be going to the archipelago known as Japan, right? It doesn't need to be the nation of Japan. It's not quite as loaded as a flag.
And it's not the Rising Sun flag. It's the
modern one?
The modern one.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. What's that doing there? Who knows?
It's for morale. Honestly, Karlman is just very good for morale.
Oh my gosh.
He's adorable, like cooing and giggling in the middle of these explosions.
Grabbing Uso's finger.
Yes.
The thing about Karlman being totally unfazed by explosions actually reminded me of, was it Shoot 'em Up? Where there's a baby who was born in above like a metal bar or club of some kind, concert hall, and then they keep having to play loud music to calm the baby.
That sounds right. I feel like there was a baby in Shoot 'em Up. That movie is like a fever dream. I mostly just remember the ending and the bit about turn signals. And Uso makes a little like baby flail for Karlman.
Oh my gosh.
To get him up into the cockpit.
A bonkers series of events. They put him inside a normal suit.
Or it's like the fatigues that they were wearing when they were pretending to be techs.
And so, of course, as a baby, he's only fitted into the upper part of it, but his head is where the neck opening would be. And then Uso grabs the legs of this thing and just like flips Karlman up to Shakti, who's waiting at the platform by the mobile suit cockpit to catch Karlman. But it's like, you could have just tossed the baby straight in the air. Why?
I have half a dozen objections to this, but it's so funny that I'm going to let all of them go. You can get away with a lot if you're very funny.
Odello going all rock'em sock'em robots on that other mobile suit.
Pa 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 pa. I thought it was more like Punch Out. But yeah, the like rapid fire punchings, very funny.
I did notice Odello has taken to calling Chronicle White Mask. Do we think that's a nod to other masked characters in various programs?
Maybe. It feels like the kind of nickname you'd pick up in a tokusatsu. Like,
or
again,
Sailor Moon, Tuxedo Mask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like taking inspirations from outside of the mecha genre, definitely, on that one. As I think Victory does a lot. We touched on Odello's very brief like interaction with this completely unnamed, I checked the credits, I think completely unnamed Zanskar officer, junior officer. She's wearing a different uniform from the ones that Odello and Uso have stolen, so she's not an apprentice technician the way they are. I don't know what her role on the ship is, except that she does the laundry. But he sees her, he thinks she's cute. He assumes that because she's young and cute, she must be here against her will, and he's like, hey, come with us. And she has no idea what he's talking about because she's exactly where she wants to be. She is a Zanskar zealot. And when she dies, later in the episode, very possibly as a result of something Odello did, she does one final Zanskar Nazi salute.
Yep.
And then collapses and dies on top of another girl. This too is toxic Yuri.
Yuri is lesbian romance in anime and manga, for anyone who's unfamiliar. I'm sure we'll have a lot more complaints about things that didn't make sense, but since you brought up this character, I was immediately struck by how contemporary her character design feels to me. She feels like someone who could have walked out of an anime this season, 2024. The color choice, the hairstyle. I mean, obviously everything old is new again, but part of it, at least, is that this episode, despite narratively having a lot of problems, looks gorgeous. I don't know what it is, but I thought the colors seemed richer and more saturated. The detail looked really sharp and beautiful. I thought this episode looked great most of the time.
Yeah, I agree. Although, now that I think about it.
What?
No, there's just one really goofy bit where they've done like it's when Mira first intervenes in the standoff. She like throws the plastic explosive down between the two groups, which, again, you probably could have thrown that right at Chronicle's feet and blown him to smithereens, but I'm not telling you how to do your job. Mira Miguel, you're a much better commander than I would be.
Commander or commando?
Commando. But then she pops out in front of them, and the shot starts off pretty far away. Everybody's, small in the distance. But then they zoom in, and the art they're zooming in on is not detailed enough to sustain as much zoom as they do. So you end up getting some very goofy faces, and Mira's is the goofiest of all. But that's not a real criticism of the episode. That's just a funny thing I noticed. For the most part, yeah, it looks great. The thing I thought of, though, when Odella meets this Zanskar girl wasn't the modern look of her design, although I agree with you about that. But seeing this interaction, the main thing it made me think was, hey, where are the Klansky sisters? Like, what's going on with them? Haven't seen them in a while. Did they just get discarded at some point? Did they step off the White Ark like, see you guys, we'll wait until the war's over?
Well, the elder sister, didn't she leave them some time ago because she didn't want to be involved in this, but the younger sister wanted to keep fighting?
No, they implied that was going to happen, and then they both stayed there for many episodes after that. The younger sister left to get a medical operation, but then came back, and they were both there for a couple of episodes, and now they're just somewhere, chilling.
Like Flanders. Just assume they're around. Just assume they're around.
That's fair.
The other thing that this no-name laundry girl reminded me of was Kai and what's-her-face Spellfest girl.
Oh, Miharu.
Yeah,
Miharu
Kai and
Toki.
Miharu. And that wasn't the only callback to sort of early Gundam in this episode. Mira being held by the enemy, Mira being on the bridge and in their power, felt very similar to when Camille's mother is captured at the beginning of Zeta.
Yeah. Also, Gosbarrel's whole escape sequence is very reminiscent of when Rambaral's subordinate, Kozun, I think is the one, Kozun Graham, escapes from the White Base, although that was a real escape, whereas this one has been arranged in advance for his benefit. We should probably talk about the serious stuff, at least a little bit. We've talked a lot about all the funny and fun, intentionally or otherwise, bits of the episode, but we should probably talk about the Earth Clean operation, or...
Operation Earth Clean, isn't it?
They do in the English. The Japanese is Chikyu Kirei ni suru saksen. And kirei can mean clean, but it can also mean pretty. So I keep thinking of this as the Earth Beautification Initiative, which is somehow even more menacing in my mind than Earth Clean Operation.
Oh, I think clean is much more menacing, but another sort of big world-building thought that this episode brought up for me. The very first shot of the episode is part of the Zanskar fleet blowing up yet another church.
Yes.
But this story is very curious in that they talk a lot about Mariaism and promoting Mariaism, but it's never anti-something else. It's never like, we're fighting those evil Christians or Muslims or Hindus or Buddhists or whatever. Is Universal Century Society meant to be interpreted as just sort of agnostic or atheistic? And they're like bringing religion back to society? Or maybe they just didn't want to explicitly name a religion, but it would be exceedingly unusual for a religious war to not be against some other named religion.
Mm-hmm. But as you've pointed out before, I mean, when this happened at the beginning of the episode, I immediately paused and wrote down in my notes, it's that thing Nina is always banging on about. Yeah, they're in the visual text, if not in the dialogue. Yeah, they are over and over again attacking and destroying religious buildings.
And when not destroying them, almost like a desecration of them. In the case of Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, they don't destroy the building itself, but they set up a guillotine to conduct executions in the square in front of the church.
Yes, absolutely.
So...
And also the capture and recuperation of the religious artifacts of other prior religious movements. The use of that statue of Artemis of Ephesus as a statue of Maria.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that is a thing that religions have done forever. The fact that we even call it Artemis of Ephesus reflects the Hellenistic world of the Greeks taking this non-Greek, pre-existing Anatolian goddess and being like, oh, that's definitely Artemis. That's one of our goddesses.
Here's another thought to sort of let percolate. Zanskar and Vespa's total disregard for the historical and cultural legacy of humanity on Earth. The destruction of these buildings that have not only religious importance, but cultural and artistic and historic significance and value. At one point, one of the ships hits this old stone aqueduct or bridge that's probably hundreds of years old. Is Tomino perhaps musing on the fact that moving humanity to space divorces us from our history, from our cultural context as having come from Earth? Is he, in effect, making a statement that humanity living in space, growing up in space for generations, would divorce us from our incredible cultural, artistic, historic legacy?
I think so. I mean, certainly Zanskarism as a movement, Mariaism, does not have a lot of respect for the traditional culture of Earth, does not have a lot of respect for older religions, older institutions, older buildings. There is a cult of youth, of childhood, like when Katagina talks about killing all of the adults and sparing only the children. The old is corrupt, the new, the youthful, the rejuvenated, these are the things that we care about. We only care about the future, not about the past.
And is reflected in their sort of ahistoric outlook from the get-go that, if we just kill enough of our naysayers, then we will be able to bring about peace forever. Says a person who's never read about any war.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is also just part of what genocide is. Like, this is part of how you do a genocide. You have to destroy the culture as well as the people.
The people and any evidence that they ever existed.
And this is part of why the Motorads are so monstrous, so terrifying, and so perfectly suited. Like, I know they're silly, I know they're impractical, but I'm on Team Motorad here. Hang on, let me rephrase that, because I don't mean to imply that I approve of what they're doing. I think they're good designs for the show. I think they work well for what the show is trying to do because those big steamroller tires are so indiscriminate in what they destroy that it reflects how little the people operating them care about what they're destroying.
And yet at the same time, there is something very... personal is not quite the right word. I'm going to have to think about the word that I want. But the fact that they are using a physical method to crush everything into dust rather than an explosive or a laser or some futuristic weapon that would allow them to create a similar amount of destruction but from a much more distant remove and without having direct sort of physical contact to what they are destroying.
But a laser, a missile, a gun, all of those things have to, at least to some degree, be aimed. They have to be used with some amount of intention. You have to pull a trigger.
Well, someone is steering the motorrad.
Yes, but they're not steering it to destroy. They're steering it to get to a place. And all the destruction along the way is incidental. It's intended. It's the desired outcome. But they're not consciously looking down there and saying, I'm going to run over that, and I'm going to run over that, and I'm going to run over that. They're just going forward because they don't care. All of these buildings are just in their way. Except for Katagina. Katagina, who is using more beam energy packs and missiles than anybody else, because she just loves to destroy things. She loves to shoot the gun.
I couldn't decide if those lines about her were meant to indicate that she's just super gung-ho or that she's sort of profligate and wasteful.
Oh, both. Definitely both. She's developing into one of my favorite characters in this show, and this line is a big part of it, this kind of treatment of her.
Her rolling up and being like, oh, be sure to rearm my mobile suit first before you help Gazbarl.
Before you check out this captured Victory, which probably saves Uso from being discovered. Her selfish orders pull that tech away right before he would have looked in the cockpit and been like, hey, there's a kid in here. Bring the guns that don't hit anybody.
The word that they use there that gets translated as selfish can absolutely mean selfish. It's a good translation. But I love this word, it's kate. And it kind of means like doing as you like. Wanting to do everything your own way and for your own convenience. Someone can be selfish without necessarily being inconsiderate and inconveniencing others, but the implication of kate is that you are inconveniencing other people, that you are very inconsiderate.
All right. Speaking of people who are inconveniencing others, what is your read on Shakti in this episode?
I'm deeply frustrated with Shakti, but I also can admit that there is something quite real about how she's depicted, because she's clearly in denial, right? She thinks on some level that maybe she can convince her uncle to stop, even after the extremely patronizing head pat and be on your way situation, even after being kept effectively a prisoner. Somehow, she thinks she can convince him with her words to stop. And part of that is probably because she doesn't want to be a combatant. More than any other of the main characters, she's here and she wants to be with them and she wants to be with Uso, but she is not going to get in a cockpit and she's not going to pick up a gun. So what does she have other than her words and these important, albeit newly reestablished relationships?
Yeah, I kept coming back to that conversation she has with Susie about women's work a few episodes back. Because Shakti is facing this situation where, with the Ligue Militaire, she's a nobody. She's not a pilot. She's not a soldier. She doesn't want to be any of those things. She's not doing real combat duties. She's not really helping to end the war. And she desperately wants the war to end. Desperately. Over on the Zanskar side, she's an important person. In theory, she might have some influence. She might be able to do something to end the war. It's a long shot. It's an impossibly long shot. But if Uso is out there risking his life in the mobile suit, I think Shakti is thinking, why can't I be out there risking my life, trying to talk them around, trying to negotiate with them, trying to convince them to give up on this monstrous plan? And it's naive. I think once a person has reached the actively doing ethnic cleansing stage, there's no talking them down from that. There's no negotiating with that. They've crossed the moral event horizon. To get there, they've gone through so many moral gates. They've had so many opportunities to turn back, and they've ignored all of them. So at that point, it's either full capitulation, death, or I guess they succeed. You can't negotiate them down to doing just a little genocide.
It also picks at a contradiction inherent to Zanskar and Mariaism and their supposed promotion of matriarchal society. In her person, in her identity, Shakti is important, but she is a young girl. And the fact is, Chronicle doesn't respect her opinion and doesn't really care what she has to say or what she thinks about any of this.
All the real decisions here are being made by adult men.
And Chronicle is pro-women when those women agree with him. See Katagina.
Yeah.
Or when, like his sister, he can use them. And right now, he's hoping he can use Shakti eventually in some way. I don't think the show is going to go there, but if I were Shakti, what I would actually do is try to get in touch with some League militaire higher-ups, or if they have a propaganda arm, and be like, I'm Maria Pure Harmonia's daughter, and I'm against this war. Start helping me craft broadcasts, like pirate broadcasts that we can send to Zanskar to sow dissension.
Heresy.
Yeah. Like, that would be the move, I think. Would people believe that you're Maria Pure Harmonia's daughter? Maybe not. It's not like you look like her, but it'd be worth a shot.
Alternate version of the Bible where Jesus leads a crusade against God.
It also felt almost cruel at the end of the episode that everyone else is so concerned for Uso and thinking, don't mention his mom. He's going to be really disappointed. We're not going to make him talk about that. And Shakti's in the cockpit with him being like, you should have saved her and not me. She does apologize to him for the situation. And when he apologizes to her, I don't think he really means it exactly. I think he's just saying it to help her feel better. Because he says, you didn't really want to escape. You wanted to stay and convince your uncle, and I dragged you away. So maybe I'm the one who should be apologizing. But I don't think Uso really believes that Shakti can convince Chronicle to stop the war.
No, but I do wonder if Uso thinks that the mission would have gone smoothly if he hadn't tried to also rescue Shakti.
And it might have done. But Mira kind of took charge in the way that she ought to have done and said, oh no, save Shakti.
Yeah. And maybe Mira knows more than has been let on. Maybe Mira knows that Shakti is in some kind of specific real danger here.
Or that Shakti poses a real threat to the League militaire and the resistance effort for as long as Zanskar holds her and controls her.
Or maybe she recognizes, as you do, that Shakti actually could do something over on the League militaire side. Shakti could actually be a powerful weapon against Zanskar.
Although Mira's comment to Uso implies more that the longer Shakti is with Zanskar, the more likely it is they are to be able to indoctrinate her and bring her over to their cause. Which is true.
At the end of the day, I think Shakti's failings as a person are on full display in this episode, but her failings as a person are her triumph as a character.
And now Tom's research on the inspiration for the name Zanskar.
I think I know where Tomino got the name Zanskar. Oh, we've known for a while where he got the name in general. It is the name of a region in the Himalayas, currently part of the Indian Union, and just south of and frequently included within the strategically important Himalayan region of Ladakh, which has been a battleground for the rival powers of India, Pakistan, and China since the middle of the 20th century. But I think I know specifically where he got the name. Before we get there, though, let's talk a bit about Zanskar and some of the reasons why Tomino might have chosen that name. Zanskar, the name means Land of the White Copper, is a sparsely populated 200-mile-long valley divided into 4 districts and surrounded by towering mountains. The mean elevation in the valley is over 13,000 feet, and the mountain passes that offer access to the valley are closed by snow through most of the year. Sealed off like this, it becomes a bit like a space colony, a small strip of inhabited land surrounded by terrain inaccessible, impassable, and lethal. In an interview, director Tomino identified 4 reasons that he was drawn to the name Zanskar. First, because it was the country closest to heaven, presumably because of its high altitude. Second, that he liked the sound of the name Zanskar. Third, that its inhabitants were of a race neither purely Asian nor purely Western, a statement that is only true if you consider the Dards of northern India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan to be Western, as contrasted with the Asian Tibetans. But that's what he said. And finally, that its relative obscurity meant it came loaded with very few preconceptions. In the 1970s, the total population of the Zanskar region was somewhere between 8 and 12,000 inhabitants, scattered around 3 or 4 dozen small villages and cliffside monasteries, plus one town, Padum, the capital, which boasted an impressive 700 inhabitants. Official census figures from 2011 show only modest population growth, with just under 14,000 people divided among some 2,327 families. Tiny Zanskar became famous internationally thanks in large part to a 1979 travelogue by French explorer and author Michel Peissel. Zanskar, the Hidden Kingdom, which he wrote about his experiences traveling through the valley. According to his account, Peissel was one of the first foreigners to be allowed into Zanskar. The whole Ladakh region had been sealed off for strategic reasons due to the ongoing hostilities with China and Pakistan. When those restrictions were relaxed in 1975, Peissel rushed to be one of the first to see it for himself. The book he wrote about his trip proved hugely popular. Popular enough that the BBC hired him to make a 4-part miniseries about Zanskar called The Last Place on Earth, which aired every Sunday at 7:15 p.m. on BBC Two throughout June 1980. Shout out to the Radio Times and the BBC for actually recording that kind of information and making it accessible online. Peissel's account of his journey has been harshly criticized by some reviewers for his anachronistic European explorer mentality, although some of those critics do have their own dubious colonial priors. One of the most scathing that I saw came from an Indian reviewer who seemed to principally take issue with Peissel's continual characterization of Zanskar as Tibetan, independent, separate from India, and resistant to the authority of what he describes as an imperialistic New Delhi. But the book itself labors under the weight of its own contradictions. Peissel freely acknowledges the difficulty of his own situation. He is a great admirer and imitator of the famous European adventurer-explorers of olden days, yet he endures the misfortune of living in the latter half of the 20th century, when it seemed that there were few uncharted places left to explore. He never misses an opportunity to repeat all of the nice things said about him by the Zanskari people he met, always assuring the reader that he actually was very embarrassed to hear it. He's self-effacing about his personal abilities, but perhaps tends to exaggerate the enormity of the challenges that he faced and overcame during his journey. He repeats over and again how obscure the valley is, how inaccessible, how he is one of the first foreigners in centuries to visit it, yet the first person he meets in Zanskar speaks English and is wearing a Western-style parka. Throughout the narrative, he repeatedly encounters other Europeans and even a group of 6 Japanese students, likewise exploring the valley. When he meets a local notable in Padum, he discovers that the man possesses a cassette recorder given to him by a group of Austrians just a few weeks earlier. He interrupts the narrative several times in order to wax philosophical about the simple, noble lives of the Zanskar people and how much better they are, how much more satisfied and happy they seem compared to those living in the decadent, so-called modern world. He muses to himself that the people of Zanskar already have everything they really need or could want, and that greater access to the modern world would only pollute and destroy this beautifully preserved ship-in-a-bottle civilization. And yet, at every stop, he describes the way the local people marvel at all of his gizmos and gadgets, his camera, his sleeping bag, his camp stove. Money, he assures the reader, is of little value to the people of Zanskar, but everywhere he goes, people seem very glad of the rupees he hands out. Repeatedly, he mentions the then-recent Viking landers, which had just begun exploring the surface of Mars a year before he arrived in the valley. He uses this to demonstrate that the Vale of Zanskar is even more inaccessible than another planet. But personally, I think he's missed the real irony. It's not that there were no more frontiers left to explore, it's just that the ones that actually remained by the 1970s, the deep sea, outer space, other planets, they're just not accessible to a lone gentleman adventurer. In short, It's a classic European travelogue that reads like an artifact extracted from the 18th or 19th centuries, bringing with it all the good and the bad of the genre. But Paisel can't get mad at me for saying that, because I'm positive that that is what he was going for, and he would probably consider it a compliment. The really grim irony of the book, though, is in the chapter called 1,000 Pilgrims, where he learns that a group of a dozen or so Swiss climbers who were headed for Zanskar were forced to turn back due to logistical issues. He wrote, "In a way, I was relieved. Mass tourism, I knew, would only bring with it unwanted changes, and could, I believed, in no way benefit the local population." And despite knowing this, and believing it, he still went home and wrote a book raving about his amazing vacation in Zanskar. Tourism to Zanskar has, in fact, boomed since then, and his book is one of the main reasons for it. Indeed, during this research, I saw multiple other travel writers credit his book specifically for inspiring either themselves or some of their traveling companions to check out Zanskar. But for all of those problems, he writes some beautiful descriptions of the valley and its inhabitants, a few of which seem more than pertinent to Victory Gundam. It was a land of archaic traditions, in which children ran around playing riotously with infant siblings strapped to their backs, where the gods and the environment have a visceral and constant influence on people's daily lives. He writes of tiny villages surrounded by fields of mountain flowers. Quote, "If ever there lay a valley cut off from the world, a hidden, secret land, it was Zanskar. I could hardly believe that only recently I had left a world which is polluted and overpopulated. Everything in Zanskar I found near to perfection. Nothing, so it seemed, was out of place or unnatural. The rusty carcasses of tin cans and automobiles, and the death-like skeletons of electric poles, the hideous rust of corrugated iron, the soiled look of waste paper, the deadly gleam of scraps of plastic were absent. Nowhere was there the slightest reminder of mechanical ugliness. There was nothing here to tarnish the harmony of nature, in which man has his natural place blending with the earth, dressed and fed by its products, molded by its demands, and formed by its seasons." I can easily imagine Tomino nodding along to that whole passage, and many others. Paisel describes what he calls equality between the sexes, but also strictly defined gender roles. Only women spin the wool, only men weave it. In the event of divorce, which he calls frequent and relatively simple, the children are divided, with the father keeping the boys and the mother the girls. But here's the bit that made me stop and utter one of my longest and most thoughtful hmms. Paisel describes a custom in Zanskar and Ladakh generally, where, upon the marriage of the eldest son in a family, his parents immediately vacate the family home, moving into a smaller house nearby and transferring all of the father's lands, titles, and responsibilities to the younger man. To quote Paisel, "The remarkable corollary of such a system is that Zanskar is run by young people who occupy all the most important offices which we in the West generally reserve for older men. Indeed, in most of Europe, men over 45 usually have the monopoly of practically every important political, social, administrative, and economic function. But 45 is the usual retirement age in Zanskar. Certainly, management by the young is one of the greatest innovations of the Tibetan social system. This custom stems from Songtsen Gampo, the first king of Tibet, whose armies settled Zanskar in the 7th century. As a soldier, he appreciated the capabilities of young men and understood that if they were not given the reins of power, society would be bound to stagnate. We are all familiar in the West with the sight of old men clinging defiantly to authority, refusing to give up their place, and persistently fostering outmoded and antiquated ways. This system may make for stability, but it is not conducive to dynamism or progress." Now imagine Katajina saying those last couple lines about how Chronicle, as a soldier, understands the capabilities of the young, and how the world will stagnate unless they are given the reins of power, while she vaporizes a retirement community. During his research on Victory Gundam's production, Mark Simmons dug up a document dated December 13, 1991, in which Tomino outlined the story that would eventually, through various revisions, become Victory Gundam. This outline mentions Bespa, but does not use the name Zanskar. The earliest use of that name he was able to find was a revised series proposal dated April 30th, 1992. Based on this information, my theory is that Tomino encountered the name Zanskar at some point during that 4-month gap. When talking about the real-world Zanskar in an interview, Tomino called it the country closest to heaven, Ten ni ichiban chikai kuni. But Zeonic Scanlations pointed out to me that a contemporary Gundam-themed magazine, MS Saga, used slightly different language, instead calling Zanskar the Kingdom in the Sky, Tenku no Okoku. That phrase, Kingdom of the Sky, stuck out to me. I've heard a lot of epithets for Zanskar, like Paysel's The Hidden Kingdom, the BBC's The Last Place on Earth. Other books call it a closed kingdom, the place where heaven and mountains meet, the blue sky kingdom, the farthest valley, and so on. But Tenku no Okoku in Japanese, or Kingdom in the Sky in English, almost always refers to Lesotho in Africa, not to Zanskar. So where exactly did that MS Saga article get the phrase? Well, it turns out that there is one book in Japanese that does call Zanskar the Kingdom in the Sky. Tenku no Okoku Chibeto Bukyo no Sekai Zansukaru Radaku, or Kingdom in the Sky, the World of Tibetan Buddhism, Zanskar Ladakh, by Kato Takashi and Ota Toru, published in November 1991, a month before Tomino submitted his initial plan for Victory Gundam. So, my theory is that Tomino, or another staffer helping him to prepare his story outline for the next new Gundam project, read or skimmed that specific book at some point in the 5 months between its publication and the earliest known use of the name Zanskar for the space empire and the homeland of Mariaism that we know and loathe.
Wow. Good detective work. Assuming, of course, it's not purely a coincidence.
It seems like it would be quite a coincidence to use that exact specific phrase. But who knows? Like I said, it's a theory. And if I'm wrong, at least we all learned some things about Zanskar in the process.
Next time on episode 10.36, This Is My Mother, we research and discuss Victory Gundam episode 36 and Dust to Dust, the Gundam version of Go West, Young Man. Some joke about sandwiches. Death Valley. But hang on, Tom, they're not in Death Valley.
They're in a valley and death is there.
That's true, there is a lot of death there. Forehead. An uncharacteristic spark of compunction. Damned if you do. My despicable senpai. Katajino would do anything for war, but she won't do that. There are guillotines everywhere for those with eyes to see. It's astonishing that in places like this, where one ought to talk to God, Americans make Westerns. And, even for Gundam, that's messed up. Please listen to it!
Mobile Suit Breakdown is written, recorded, and produced by us, Tom and Nina, in scenic New York City, within the ancestral and unceded land of the Lenape people, and made possible by listeners like you. The opening track is Wasp by Misha Dioxin. The closing music is Long Way Home by Spinning Ratio. The recap music is Slow by Lloyd Rogers. You can find links to the sources for our research, the music used in the episode, additional information about the Lenape people, and more in the show notes on our website, GundamPodcast.com. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email hosts@GundamPodcast.com or look for links to our social media accounts on our website. And if you would like to support the show, please share us with your friends, leave a nice review wherever you listen to podcasts, or support us financially at GundamPodcast.com/Patreon. You can find links and more ways to help out at GundamPodcast.com/support. Thank you for listening. There are a lot of wrong Gundam opinions out there corrupting the fandom. Wrong opinions from wrong fans, like Cobra Panic, who argued that contrary to my research this week, Zanskar actually gets its name from how Zan-scary the guillotine is. Thanks, Cobra Panic. You have corrupted the fandom beyond salvation or forgiveness.
These are getting more intense.
The show must go on. So,
Shakti is also aboard the Adrastia. Adrastia?
I can only do exasperated voice, but if they blah, then why didn't they blah? So many times.
Truth.
But in this episode, Uso deploys a baby flail. That's pretty cool. This is still the warm-up, right? We haven't started.
Yeah, we haven't. But I was wondering if we are starting. Are we just jumping right into it?
I mean, we could. I kind of wanted to tell you about some of the ideas I've had for working title, Brush with Death.
Oh, okay.
But,
we can do that. Like, I had some plastic toy that smelled like this.
I don't even know if it was scented. I think that just might be like the smell of a certain kind of plastic.
Like, that got used in a lot of children's toys
Yeah,
when we
one
were
of
kids.
the like soft plastics that
Yeah.
they used for kids' toys all
Like,
the time.
So it's like freaking me out. I'm in this constant state of deja vu while I wear it, but it's kind of neat.
I think we could be a little blue. I think we can be a little lewd in the humor there. We didn't say anything actually gross.
But what? Is it voltage that changes country to country?
Oh, I don't know.
All right.
All I know is
hang
the
on.
prongs are different, you know?
Tom always complains I don't laugh at his puns, but he doesn't laugh at my puns either.